Hey guys, Todd Anderson here with another Magic Online video for you. Today we're going to be playing Blue-White Heroic in hopes that I can make the deck good enough for the Standard tournament that's this weekend. Now, Heroic isn't a new deck in Standard. There's been iterations that, like Tom Ross's Ban Heroic deck. There have been iterations that existed before that were just strictly blue-white and just tried to turtle up with one guy, making it gigantic, and then protecting it for a couple turns with things like a Giant's Presence, God's Willing, or Feet of Resistance, I think was the older one, or the ones from cons that people started to play a little bit of before Dragons of Tarkir came out. But there's all sorts of different types of Heroic, and this one is leaning way more towards the old school version of just blue-white, but it does have some of the Bant Heroic elements in it. So let's go over that before we get to a daily event where we'll play 4 rounds, and hopefully I can get a feel for this version and see if there are any changes that I would like to make. So first off, if you look here, the only creatures in the deck, we only have 18. We have 4 Favored Hoplite, 3 Lagana Band Trailblazer, and the reason why I'm playing 3 Trailblazer instead of the normal 2 or sometimes even 1 is that the 4 toughness it's obviously irrelevant against something like Hero's Downfall, but against decks playing Lightning Strike, Wild Slash, just burn spells in general, or even Bile Blight, Lagana Band Trailblazer is pretty powerful to have on turn 1, and then that can just be your heroic creature that you ride, with damage over the next few turns. It obviously starts with 0 power, so it's a little weaker than some of the other ones in a vacuum, but I think the fact that it dodges so much removal in the format makes it important to have at least a few in your deck. In light of that, we're only playing 2 copies of Battlewise Hoplite. It's having a draw that starts with a 1-drop creature versus a draw that starts with a 2-drop creature is a whole world of difference, especially when you're on the draw. When you're on the draw against, a deck, the removal starts to pile up at 3 mana, and so playing just your first guy on turn 2, or even having to wait until turn 3 to play it with a protection spell, is going to make you fall pretty far behind on the board, and that's not something that we really like in this deck. And Battlewise Hoplite is the hardest to cast out of all of them, which is why we have trimmed down to 2 of those. We have 3 copies of Seeker of the Way. This honestly could go down to 2 copies in favor of the 4th Lagana Band Trailblazer, but Seeker is a little worse in this version of the deck because we aren't playing Dromoka's Command, and Dromoka's Command being able to either put counters on this or use it to fight other creatures is pretty powerful. Against aggressive red decks, we're able to, gain basically double the amount of life while killing a creature. And I'm just not sure if this version with Seeker of the Way it's as good, but I still like having access to some ways to gain life in the deck that aren't Ordeal of Heliod. I'm not a huge fan of Ordeal in main decks, and especially in this version because we are playing 5 creatures that have prowess as opposed to heroic, so they don't actually get the counters, so it's harder to gain the life. And we have 4 Hero of Iroas. This one just makes sure Ordeal of Thassa costs less. That's basically it, but it's a heroic guy. We also can make sideboard cards like Encase and Ice cost less, which is kind of cool. And then last we have Monster Mentor, which pairs well with all of the cheap instants and sorceries that we have in the deck, including Treasure Cruise. And Monster Mentor is a way for you to attack from a completely different angle from the rest of your deck. When you play Monster Mentor with a couple extra mana untapped, or just 1 mana untapped to protect it, you're going to be able to get to untap and then cast 1 to 3 more spells next turn, making a ton of monks that all have prowess, and put a lot of pressure on your opponent. When you're doing that and you end up with a board full of 1/1s, it's going to be pretty difficult for your opponent's very spot removal heavy deck to interact with all of your tokens, and then 1 Treasure Cruise or 1 Ordeal of Thassa is going to start to make that snowball out of range for your opponent to be able to come back. Monster Mentor is pretty powerful. I've been thinking about playing a 3rd one in the sideboard, but we'll get to that in a minute and why I want to do that. Protection spells here, we have Divine Strike kind of is protection when we have Favorite Hoplite in our deck. Being able to target it early to give it the prevent damage buffer is kind of cool, but it's not really protection. it can grow your guy to a large enough toughness off of the heroic trigger or prowess to keep it from dying to like a burn spell or a bile blight or something sometimes. Johnny's Presence, just a very cheap way to, along with For God's Willing, the 2 Johnny's Presence is just another way to keep your guy from dying to a random removal spell. And also the Strive on it's pretty good and helps out in situations where your opponent's trying to cast Crux of Fate or something similar. We actually have 8 total protection spells if you count Valor Stance, and this is a card people kind of forgot about in Heroic, and it doesn't really make sense to me. Right now there's just a ton of Siege Rhinos in the format, a ton of Courser Crewfix, and even like the green-red Dragons deck, it has targets, like even though it can't kill Stormbreath Dragon, it still kills Thunderbreak Regent and Courser Crewfix, while also still protecting your creature when you need it to. So I really like Valor Stance in this format right now, and I think loading up on these might be better than not. We have 4 total between main deck and sideboard, and it's possible that we just want to cut all the Johnny's Presence from the deck, just play 4 copies of Valor Stance as a more versatile spell, since it can be an aggressive or reactive answer to various things that can stand in your way. That's basically the main deck. Everything is pretty generic. We have Ordeal of Thassa, since it just draws a bunch of cards and pumps our guy. Aqueous Form helps us bust through creature stalls, since we don't have Dromoka's Command to fight some stuff and clear the board that way. The sideboard is where it gets interesting, and it doesn't seem like it if you just look at it at first glance. It's like, okay, he has some Disdainful Strokes, some Encase in Ice. All these cards really make sense, but there are a lot of matchups where you actually have the option to board out a ton of stuff and just kind of transform into this control deck with, like, against green, like let's say against Abzan aggro. We can bring in 3 Encase in Ice and 2 Valor Stance along with the 2 Treasure Cruise, and just use these removal spells and Treasure Cruise to control their board. And the fact that we also have Valor Stance to protect our guy is pretty powerful too, so that if they choose to spend their turn killing our guy, we can protect it, and if they choose to spend their turn playing a creature, we can kill it. So we get to use our mana more efficiently than our opponents in a lot of scenarios, and with 4 Treasure Cruise, sometimes we just outcard them and we just make sure we can kill everything with Encase and Valor Stance, and then use Treasure Cruise to refuel at the end of it. There are other matchups like Abzan, I guess Control or mid-range, the ones that play Fleecemane Lion, Siege Rhino, and all that junk. Then we also get to bring in Disdainful Stroke, and we get to board in Encase in Ice, Valor Stance, Disdainful Stroke, Treasure Cruise, and Stratus Dancer, and that's 13 cards, so our deck is going to change drastically, and in a lot of those scenarios I'm cutting Seeker of the Way, Lagana Band Trailblazer, things that are not as good, and we're just going to focus on the heroic creatures and turtle up behind them, play a few ways to protect them, and then all the rest of our cards are going to counter and kill everything that they do, or draw 3 cards. Stratus Dancer is a new card I'm trying out. I'm hoping that it's going to end up being good. Right now, I'm looking forward to giving it a shot, and that would make me pretty happy if it was good. So, yeah, I guess that's about it. Encase in Ice doesn't really come in against Mono Red aggro. It doesn't do enough, but it is very good against Thunderbreak Regent and Stormbreath Dragon decks, and it has versatility against Abzan aggro and stuff like that. So it's definitely a powerful card to have access to. Ordeal of Heliod comes in against really aggressive decks. Sometimes the 10-point buffer is too much for those decks to overcome. You really just need to put a clock on them and find a way to not die. It was a lot easier to do when you had Dromoka's Command, and hopefully that doesn't bite us, but it is what it is. Anyway, guys, that is Blue Eyed Heroic. Let's get to the matches.